not too bad. Tonight, I saw a horror movie called The Cursed. I found out that it had previously been called 8 for Silver. Apparently, a few years ago, this was a film that had premiered at the Sundance Movie Festival. And then they took it, they fixed it up, maybe polished it some more. I don't know, added different effects. I'm not sure. But from what I understand, it's been adjusted a bit and presented on the big screen. I first found out about this movie last week when I was getting ready to buy tickets for Uncharted. I saw this horror werewolf, type of movie was coming out, and I was like, oh, looks pretty good. I checked it on Rotten Tomatoes. All I had access to were the critic reviews, which were solid. Yes, that doesn't always mean everything, but I was interested because of the subject matter. I think the IMDb reviews were like 6, which is, audience ratings. And so a lot of times something that's 5 and up can be not too bad for a horror movie because, horror movies, they have a terrible reputation of being not so great because most of them just aren't. And yet this one, as I sat through it, I was thinking, wow, this is actually not too bad. The writing is pretty decent. I mean, there are some issues that I do have with it, but they're mild in comparison to some other movies that I've seen, like Moonfall. Jeez. Okay, one of the main things I took away from this was that this movie is fundamentally a slow burn. There is not nonstop action stuff. There's not nonstop killing, nonstop blood and gore. And you don't really see a ton of gore. Yes, there are some really nastical scenes, but it's not like this is a movie that is just loaded with it. The runtime for this is just under 2 hours, like maybe an hour and 50 minutes or something like that. So it's a kind of longish film for, a horror movie. Not all horror movies are a lot of times they run like hour and a half, hour and 40. This is like an hour and 50 something. But anyway, it opens up in the trenches of World War I. And just I was thinking as I was watching, I was like, wow, we've seen so many World War I movies or things that have events from World War I in them lately. I know World War II is kind of the more popular setting for something like that, but this just feels like we're getting so much more of the World War I stuff. But anyway, it starts off there, and then it shows another scene after that, and then from that point on, the main story here is like a flashback. It's something that happened many decades before the World War I scene. So you get the events that lead up to a character that you see, or some characters that you see at the very, very beginning. Something that I noticed about this film was that there is a lot of times in the scenes that are leading up to something tenseful happening, there's this, it's like the music that they put on there. I feel like it's strings, that real sharp sort of, and you've heard this type of music before in movie trailers for horror films. I know I have. It almost felt like it was something that came from one of those things, like almost, almost like a stock music or something like that. The sound when you hear it. It's hard for me to describe other than just that sharp, stringy sound that we hear sometimes in horror films. It doesn't have a lot of your typical, not typical, but like, let's say it doesn't have a lot of build-up music. You know how in horror movies you have this build-up of noise and then the jump scare. It's not really like that. The music is kind of subtle, and when it happens, you start to feel the amping up of the tension. And some of the ways that the scenes were shot, specifically off the top of my head when I'm saying this. I'm thinking of a scene that shows an event that happens with a group of people and they get basically slaughtered, and you don't really get the up close of it. It's actually something you see from a distance because the people go to this group of people and you don't really hear the words. You don't get the up close, facial shots and how they get all in there like that. It's like the camera's up on a hill and you're viewing it as a spectator from far away. And I found that to be pretty effective in its chilling delivery and the impact that it had. And so I thought that was well done. And just in general, I mean, that was really the only shot like that. But I remember when that happened, and that was something that took place early on in the film. I remember when they were showing that, I was thinking to myself, well, that's a pretty different way to shoot a scene so brutal and awful in what was going on, but that it was so effective. And I was like, I think this actually might be a pretty decent movie. And of course, it ended up being pretty decent despite some issues, like I said. There were a couple of complaints. More than a couple. I had some issues that I noticed, not really complaints, just things I noticed. For one thing, I feel like this movie would have been great to listen to with earbuds because the audio was so low. It was actually really hard to hear, and it wasn't like the audio was being overwhelmed by the music in the background. It was almost like the audio in the theater was just turned way down. Or they just weren't speaking or their voices weren't processed enough. The audio wasn't processed enough to bring it up a little bit more. It was pretty low. And yet at the same time, I could kind of tell by the way they were talking, wow, this would be almost soothing to listen to. You know how some voices, when they talk, it's a very soothing quality to it. I was getting that feeling in the movie theater. So I don't know how this would sound for real on listening to it through earbuds, but I might give it a go at some point whenever I rewatch this. I wouldn't mind rewatching this again. What else? Dark picture too. Some of the scenes were really, really overcast. Like I felt like there was a fog or a filter over the camera lens. And I don't know if that was just the movie theater or the way it was shot. I have a feeling if I watched it on my TV or if I watched it on my laptop, it wouldn't really feel that way. So it might have just been the movie screen or the movie, or I don't know. But anyway, those were little things I noticed. Also, something else that I appreciated about this film was that they really don't show the creature in here a lot. I mean, you do see more of it towards the end, and when you see more of it, I feel like that's kind of where some of the weakness of the movie come into play, the special effects. Kind of like how, Brotherhood of the Wolf is a really good movie, but the CGI is not so great when it shows the creature. Stuff like that. The same holds true with this. I mean, it wasn't the worst CGI I've ever seen. And there are some moments when when you see the creature on screen, that it's actually not CGI. It's like a real, practical effect or whatever. But most of the time when the creature is moving around, doing stuff, whatever, or pretty much all the time, it's CGI, and it just doesn't look the best. But I can get past that because the story itself was done so well that it's easier to forgive things like that. But so yeah, that was something I noticed, but also appreciated the fact that they didn't go overboard with showing the creature. And it was a good while. It was quite a while before before the creature even shows up. Let's just say that. What else? Oh, also, I kind of felt like this movie was sort of so I went in thinking it's a werewolf movie, but it's not quite. It's not exactly. And so then as things were happening, I was like, well, wait, is this a Wendigo and not a werewolf? I didn't really know much about Wendigos until like 20 plus years ago when I saw an episode of Charmed, and it was about Wendigos. And then in Supernatural, they had a thing about Wendigos, and there was a movie about a Wendigo. And so this honestly feels like a combination of werewolf and Wendigo, the lore, because you have the references to the silver, and yet some aspects of the creature, which I don't want to get into too much. I'd rather you just watch it for yourself if you're interested. Some aspects of the creature don't fit that typical werewolf sort of mold. You'll know what I mean when you get to it. But anyway, so there's that. Another thing, they reference, okay, so this was an interesting part of the movie, but also a big sort of mess up because the timeline was like 100 years off. And what I'm referring to is the fact that, so one of the main characters is this guy played by, I can't remember the dude's name. It'll show him here in a second. He played in Logan. He was the bad guy. He also played in one of the Predator, one of the more recent Predators movie. Jeez, what the heck is his name? I'll put it up on the screen. He plays he's a pathologist, and he comes to this little town, and it takes place in France. And it's that guy right there with the torch. He comes to this town. He's investigating something, kind of, chasing down, sort of like following after this creature, basically trying to track it down or figure things out or whatever. And so through the course of the movie, you find out more about his past. You find out about his family. And he mentions that he was, I'm pretty sure it's like he was part of the army that went, or he was part of the group of people that was involved in trying to take down or fight or whatever the beast of, and I'm not going to say this right, Gévaudan, whatever, the beast that's represented in the movie The Brotherhood of the Wolf. It's based on a true story that took place back in the 1700s. I think it was the 1760s, and there was this beast that was attacking and killing people. It didn't kill everybody that it attacked, but it attacked a lot. There are various numbers that have been thrown out there as far as how many people it killed. Some say it was like 100, some say it was like several hundred, up into the 600s, but they never really completely figured out what the heck this thing was. And it was described as large. So some people said it had this long snout. Some people said it was like a wolf. And so that has been a great subject matter for horror stories, or, like werewolf legends or whatever to draw from. And so this guy references that he was there. And I was thinking to myself, like later I was like, wait, the whole thing with the beast in France, that story, it happened in the 1700s. And yet this movie, the bulk of this story, is taking place in the late 1800s. So they took huge liberties with the historical timeline in that. That is not really a big deal. I thought it was interesting that they were tying it together. In fact, the first time they mentioned the beast or the location where the beast was, I was like, did they say that word? Because, I was like, this is a werewolf movie. Are they going to, is that what they're talking about? And then they referenced it multiple times. And so it's like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. But wow, that's the time is just really not right on that. But whatever, I can forgive it. It's a fiction movie. They take liberties with the truth. Also, another thing that kind of tied it together was that in the Brotherhood of the Wolf, there are gypsies involved in the whole storyline, just like there are in this. So it's like it's definitely these threads kind of tying it all together, and they're making the connection to the beast of whatever, the beast of G, and this beast. Like it's related, or it's. I don't want to get too much into it to explain how it all happens, but you see it as you're watching the film. What else? Oh, so a couple of other issues that I noticed, like a little problems with the writing in some of the scenes. Like I said, it just overall it was pretty solid, so I'm not complaining too much. But there was something that happened to one of the characters, and evidence was left behind of what happened. But this person involved in what happened was trying to keep it a secret. Okay. So then it made no sense to me as to why this person didn't go clean up remnants of the event. However, it was the remnants of the event still being visible that led to other events happening or a character figuring out something that was going on. So I understood that had to be there. But I was like, that doesn't make sense with the way the character is behaving. The character would go try to hide it if they're trying to hide it, you know, in other aspects. So I was like, I don't know about that. And also there was, at some point, I'm just trying to word it to avoid spoilers. There was at some point that a character was suspicious of another character, wanted to know where this person was, and yet didn't follow up on that suspicion. And so I was like, well, that also doesn't make sense. You would think they would, given what's going on, they would want to track down this person that they're looking for, and yet they just kind of dropped it after that. So those are little, tiny things that I noticed. I'm sure there's probably more, but for the most part, I was just really drawn into the story and the characters. I thought they were pretty well written, and the acting in here was really good. The woman on the poster, gosh, I think her name might be Reilly, but I'm not sure. She played in the second Sherlock Holmes movie with Robert Downey Jr. She played Watson's wife. I've seen her in several different things, but the relationship she has with her husband, you kind of get the sense that they, there are certain things that are like, you feel removed from their characters, even though they're pretty solidly acted and they seem very genuine and realistic. Her and her husband, you get the sense that they're not very close, because there's a scene that happens in there and you're like, okay, well, that was kind of strange. What's up with them? But anyway, I guess that's just an element that they're showing you, the viewer, to sort of underscore what type of relationship is going on with the husband and wife. Anyway, so that's about all I can think of to say about this film. It was pretty creepy. Some parts for sure. Some of the suspense that happened, was, like I said, it was a slow burn. So it wasn't like you're on the edge of your seat the entire time. You just know things are leading up to something bad happening. Some of the scenes were definitely pretty tense, but it wasn't like it wasn't like super horrifying or scary. I would say just a lot of creepy elements, some disturbing scenes, and some suspense, because, this creature's out and about and, stuff's happening, things like that. But I felt it was pretty effectively done, and one of the, more solid horror films out there. And yeah, I can't think of anything else. So I think I'm going to start wrapping this one up. It's probably not going to be in theaters very long. I honestly feel like this could probably be appreciated just fine on the small screen. I just went to go see it because it was new. I was like, oh, a horror film, looks interesting. But I would have been just as happy to watch it at home. I almost feel like this should have been something that got a direct-to-video sort of release, because it's not, the actors in here, they're not huge draws, so it's not going to perform hugely at the big screen. On the big screen, I don't think, but you never know. Anyway, if you are a fan of horror and werewolf/Wendigo movies, maybe give this a go and see what you think. Maybe you'll like it as much as I did. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll think it sucks. But I thought it was pretty solid. So give it a thumbs up. Okay, that's it for now, you guys. Bye.